Picture this, you're out on the road, the sun beating down on your windshield, you turn the key and nothing happens. Not a spark, not a single roar from the engine. Just silence. The Toyota HILUX, the very one they advertise as an indestructible beast, has just gone as silent as a stone. But how can something so reliable fail? The answer is hidden under the hood. It's a problem that many would rather not talk about, a flaw concealed beneath the HILUX's reputation for durability, the fuel pump in its electronic control module. This component is as essential as it is discreet. Think of the fuel pump as the heart of your HILUX. It's the one responsible for delivering that vital fuel from the tank to the engine. Without that push, the vehicle can't even breathe, let alone move forward. Now imagine that heart starts to fail, but you don't always notice it right away. Sometimes, it gives subtle signs, hesitant starts, a sudden loss of power, or the check engine light coming on without warning, as if the car were quietly trying to tell you, something's not right. When official workshops and dealerships recognize this failure, they usually apply a software update or directly replace the module. But here's the real dilemma, not everyone recognizes it right away. Some downplay it, others blame it on using low-quality diesel, or simply on normal wear and tear. The result is that many owners end up paying for repairs without knowing that this defect was already there before, even from the factory. Now, let's talk about the cost. Replacing this module can cost anywhere from $600 to $900, depending on the model and the country. And if the damage has affected other parts of the injection system, the bill can easily go above $1,200. All because of a component that should work properly throughout the entire lifespan of the vehicle. Some mechanic forums call it the Achilles heel of the modern HILUX. Because yes, you can have a reinforced chassis, lifted suspension, and all-wheel drive. But if your engine isn't getting fuel, all that toughness becomes useless. But if you think the worst thing the HILUX can hide is in the engine, wait until you see what happens inside the cabin. Do you know what's worse than driving down a dirt road full of dust? Coming home, opening the door of your Toyota HILUX, and realizing that same dust came in with you, on the dashboard, on the buttons, on the seats, as if the cabin were just another extension of the road. At first glance, the HILUX looks like it's built to withstand any terrain, mud, rocks, dust, rivers, you name it. But what they don't tell you, or what very few people admit, is that there are some versions that aren't as well sealed as they should be. In other words, dust from outside, and even water, can find invisible cracks to sneak right into the interior. This problem usually shows up after the first few months of use, especially if you drive in rural areas, on unpaved roads, or even if you wash the truck with a pressure washer. The cause is poor sealing on the doors, specifically the weather strips, those black rubber strips that line the door frame and are supposed to keep anything from getting inside. But when that seal isn't properly installed or starts to wear out too soon, strange things start happening. You find small puddles right along the edge of the floor. The central locking buttons stop responding. The alarm goes off by itself in the middle of the night, and maybe the worst part, moisture appears inside the electrical panels. And this isn't just an aesthetic annoyance. It's a problem that slowly eats away from the inside and can turn into an electrical nightmare. A central locking system that fails during an emergency, an alarm that turns itself off, interior lights that flicker for no apparent reason. And all this in a truck that claims to be tough enough for anything. And it's not a problem you can fix with just a cloth or a blower. In many cases, you have to take apart sections of the upholstery to check if water has reached the internal connectors, and that's not cheap. According to reports from independent workshops, repairing damage caused by leaks can cost between $250 and $800, depending on how many electrical systems have been affected. And the most disappointing part is that, many times, the original weather stripping isn't even replaced with a better one. Instead, they just recommend not using pressure washers or avoiding very dusty roads. That's a solution that's closer to resignation than to an actual repair. And if you were already surprised that water and dust can get into your cabin without permission, just wait until you find out what happens when the engine and the transmission start speaking different languages. Has it ever happened to you that you press the accelerator and the truck doesn't respond the way it should? As if it hesitates, as if it's deciding whether it wants to move or not. That split-second delay might seem insignificant, but in an automatic HILUX, it could be a silent warning of something deeper. When you buy a Toyota HILUX with an automatic transmission, you expect two things: power and smoothness. You expect that when you press the accelerator, the engine and the transmission will communicate like a perfectly synchronized team, almost like a dancer who doesn't need to look at their partner to know what the next move is. But what they don't always tell you is that in some versions, especially those that have been on the market for more than 5 years, that communication is breaking down. There are drivers who describe the experience as clumsy, as if the engine had intentions but the transmission just didn't understand them. You feel slow gear changes, unexpected jerks, or worse yet, a kind of jam where the transmission gets stuck in a single gear. This causes the engine to rev unnecessarily, as if it were trapped in a race it never asked to run. And the most baffling part is that when some users report this to the dealership, the response is usually the same: that's normal in the HILUX. Yornal, since when is it acceptable for a vehicle to use more fuel, overheat, or have rough gear changes? The reality is that this kind of problem has a name: poor synchronization between the automatic transmission control module software and the engine's response. In simple terms, the computer that controls the gear shifts doesn't always know when it should change gears, and that, in tough terrain or during quick maneuvers, can be a risk. On top of that, there's the silent financial impact, because when the HILUX stays in a low gear for too long, the engine works harder than it needs to, burns more fuel, and as a result, you end up spending more. According to calculations from users in specialized forums, this kind of issue can increase diesel consumption by 10 to 20% per month, depending on your driving style. And what's even more concerning is that if this problem isn't addressed in time, it can lead to premature wear of the automatic transmission. Replacing a transmission is no walk in the park. In Latin America, that can cost you anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000, depending on the exact model and whether you use original parts. Many owners don't even realize their HILUX is having issues, because the vehicle starts, moves forward, and there aren't any warning lights on the dashboard. But little by little, the system becomes more erratic, until one day it just stops responding. And if it's already worrying that the HILUX isn't listening to its own transmission, what happens when it can't even feel the road properly? You're going 100 kilometers per hour, the road is straight, everything seems perfect, but suddenly, when you brake, you feel a slight tremor in the steering wheel. Nothing dramatic, barely noticeable, but it's there. A vibration that, over time, turns into a warning whisper. Something's not right. One of the pillars that builds the HILUX's reputation is its stability. It's marketed as a solid machine, as if every part were made to last for decades under the most extreme conditions. But there are details that challenge that narrative, and one of the most concerning is right where we should feel the most confident: in the steering, in the brakes. Many HILUX owners, even with recent models, have reported excessive vibrations when braking or taking corners at certain speeds. The steering feels loose, as if there's a bit of play in it. In some cases, you can even hear a slight knocking sound when turning the wheel or going over small bumps. And you know what's most unsettling? When you take it to the shop, more than one technician will say it's normal in these models. Once again, that dreaded word, normal, but it's not. The causes can vary, but in most cases it's due to premature looseness in steering components, ball joints, bushings, or tie rods that shouldn't be wearing out so soon. Accelerated brake pad wear is also a recurring issue. They have to be replaced more often than expected, increasing maintenance costs over time. And how much does all this cost? Replacing brake discs and pads can cost between $300 and $700, depending on whether they're original or aftermarket parts. If you also have to replace steering components, the bill can go over $1,000, and that's not even counting the time lost on inspections, adjustments, and tests. But here comes the most frustrating part. Most of these defects don't show up in the first few miles or during test drives. It's only with continuous use, with the demands of daily life, that the HILUX starts to show that its strength isn't always so unbreakable. It's like armor that, even though it looks flawless, has internal cracks that only time reveals. And if you were already surprised to learn that the HILUX can falter when it should stand firm, what would you think if I told you that there are modern versions that don't come with stability control? Few things make you feel safer than driving a HILUX. The height, the power, the weight. You feel like you could cross any terrain without breaking a sweat. But that feeling can be an illusion, because even a giant like this can fall if it's missing a key piece to keep it standing. Electronic Stability Control, known as ESC for its initials in English, is one of those systems that almost nobody mentions until they need it. And it's not something you can see. It doesn't have a flashy button or a feature that gets shown off in commercials. But when you take a dangerous curve, brake on wet ground, or swerve to avoid an obstacle at high speed, ESC can be the only barrier between you and a serious accident. This system acts like a silent guardian angel. It detects when the vehicle loses traction and, in a matter of milliseconds, selectively brakes the necessary wheels to regain control. In other words, it keeps you on track when you've already lost control. And here's the problem. Some versions of the Toyota HILUX don't come with it built in. Yes, you read that right. Even in 2025, there are still versions, even brand new from the dealership, that don't have stability control. And what's most concerning is that this detail isn't always clear in the technical specifications. Sometimes you only find out when you ask directly or when it's already too late. This raises a big contradiction. How can a vehicle designed for heavy loads, sharp turns, and extreme conditions go without a system that's now considered basic when it comes to safety? The answer, though harsh, is simple: cost-cutting. Some manufacturers, especially in emerging markets, leave out advanced safety systems in the more affordable versions to keep prices competitive. According to data, vehicles without ESC are 30% more likely to roll over in critical situations. And the HILUX, with its higher center of gravity, is especially vulnerable if you brake hard on a turn or try to swerve around an obstacle with the truck loaded. And how much does this omission cost? Well, technically, the ESC system can be added at the factory for around $100 to $150 per unit. But for you, as a buyer, it might cost you the difference between a version with or without it, which sometimes means paying up to $2,000 more. Is that extra expense worth it? If you consider that we're talking about a feature that can prevent a rollover, the answer is obvious. And there you have it. 5 truths that aren't mentioned in the commercials. 5 invisible cracks in the armor of one of the most iconic vehicles in the world. Because yes, the Toyota HILUX is still a reliable, strong, and sought-after machine. But even giants have blind spots. Maybe the most important thing we can learn from this is that no vehicle is perfect. Not even those that have survived explosions, wars, or commercials that make them seem immortal. True strength isn't just in the steel of the chassis, but in the transparency of information. Because when you know the flaws, you can anticipate them. And when you anticipate, you drive with awareness, not just with confidence. What do you think? Would you still consider buying a HILUX knowing all this? Let me know in the comments.